He had watched the scene unfold 100 times in his head, but it was still a shock to see his mother's chair missing from the family table. His wife, a master of a practiced performance, feigned a gasp and pressed a manicured hand to her chest. "Oh my goodness, we must have miscounted," she said, her voice dripping with an insincere sweetness that made his stomach turn. He knew it was no mistake, just another subtle reminder to his mother and to him of where she truly belonged. As his mother left quietly, disappearing into the crowd without a word, he felt a crushing weight settle in his own chest. He watched her go, a million silent apologies dying on his tongue. The phone in his pocket felt like a lead weight, and he knew he should have called her, should have made some grand public gesture to show that he cared. But he didn't. He simply let her walk away, and by the time she was gone, he was already too late. The check stopped 3 days later, just as the mortgage payment was due. He wasn't surprised. He knew this day was coming, had seen it in her quiet strength as she'd walked away from the family she had paid to keep. But he never imagined that the first call he'd have to make wouldn't be to her, but to his wife, who had just discovered their car had been repossessed. You here follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story ends. I should have realized something was off the second I stepped into that backyard. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Blue and silver balloons were tied neatly to every chair. The superhero-themed cake was massive and intricate, probably more expensive than most people spend on groceries in a week. Tables were arranged with precision. Nothing about it looked like a kid's party thrown together with love. It looked curated, professional, costly. And none of that surprised me, since I was the one footing the bill. As I approached the long family table, my steps slowed. Something wasn't right. I counted the seats. Once. Then again. 7 people, 6 chairs. Where was mine? "Grandma Harriet!" Byron's voice cut through my thoughts. He came running, all energy and excitement in his pristine Spider-Man costume. Another thing I'd paid for without being asked. His arms flung around me, and I held him tight, breathing in the sweet scent of cake, sunscreen, and childhood. Still, my eyes drifted back to that table. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered into his hair. "Are you having fun?" "The best. Did you see the bounce house? And there's going to be a magician." Of course there was. Nova never did anything small, not when someone else was paying for it. "Harriet, you made it." Nova's voice was sweet like honey, but I heard something beneath it. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She floated toward me in a sleek designer dress, the same one I'd seen her charge to a credit card I'd helped pay off just last month. Her smile looked polished, practiced. "We're so glad you're here." I nodded and gestured toward the main table. "Where should I sit?" Her eyes followed mine, and for a flicker of a second, I caught a glimpse of something on her face. Satisfaction? Then she gasped, placing one manicured hand on her chest. "Oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. We must have miscounted when we set up." Her words hung in the air. Miscounted, as if I were some afterthought, a forgotten RSVP. "It's fine," I heard myself say, even as my chest tightened. "I can grab a chair from—" No, don't be silly," she said with a laugh, waving her hand as if I were offering something ridiculous. "There are plenty of seats at the other tables. You'll be more comfortable over there anyway, closer to the bar." She laughed again, and a few other adults chuckled along with her. David appeared at her side, arms sliding naturally around her waist. Married routine. He glanced at the table, then at me. I waited for him to ask why his mother didn't have a seat with the family. Instead, he just gave me a soft smile. "Sorry, Mom. You know how crazy party planning gets. Nova's been so stressed trying to make everything perfect for Byron." Stressed. Spending my money had apparently taken a toll on her. I stood there, still, quiet, while guests continued to arrive. Parents I'd never met dropped off their children. Children who'd devour the cake I paid for, while the birthday boy's grandmother was pushed to the sidelines. "Of course," I murmured. "I understand." But I didn't. Not really. What I did understand with chilling clarity was that this wasn't an oversight. It wasn't an accident. The chairs were counted, deliberately. 6 chairs for the people who mattered, none for the woman who had made it all possible. I slowly walked toward one of the smaller tables at the edge of the party. I placed my purse down beside a woman I'd never met. She offered a quick, polite smile before returning to her phone. Around me, the celebration whirled on. Kids squealed from the bounce house. Parents stood in groups with wine glasses, swapping stories about soccer practice and vacation plans. From my seat, I had a clear view of the family table. Nova sat at the center like a queen, telling some dramatic story, hands waving, perfectly poised. The others were enthralled, laughing on cue. David looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and Byron sat between them, happy and oblivious, the little prince of a kingdom built on my silent generosity. I was alone, watching it all from the outside. My phone lay heavy in my bag. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and opened my banking app. It lit up with a list of familiar transactions, payments I'd made without a second thought. Mortgage, car notes, Byron's private school tuition, Nova's credit card, month after month, year after year. I had thought I was helping. I thought being generous meant being loved. I thought supporting them financially meant I had a place, an unshakable seat, in this family. But what I'd really bought was silence, invisibility. The magician arrived to squeals of joy and scattered applause. While he began setting up, Nova stood and tapped her wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" she called. "I just want to thank you all for being here to celebrate our Byron's special day. This party wouldn't have been possible without—" She scanned the crowd. Her eyes found mine. Her smile didn't flinch. "Without all the love and support from family and friends." Not a word about who made it financially possible. No mention of the woman who quietly funded it all. I sat through the magic show, through the cake cutting, through another round of happy birthday. I watched Byron blow out his candles, likely wishing for more toys, things I'd probably bought. When the party finally began to die down and parents started rounding up their sugar-crazed children, I walked over to Byron to say goodbye. He hugged me tightly, his cheeks sticky with chocolate frosting. "Thanks for my present, Grandma. I love the Lego set." "You're welcome, baby," I said, kissing the top of his head, breathing him in one last time. When I looked up, Nova was watching me. Her expression gave nothing away. "Thanks for coming, Harriet," she said, her tone smooth, controlled. "Sorry again about the seating mix-up." Mix-up. The word stung. It tasted like vinegar in my mouth. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind replaying every moment on a loop. But as I pulled into my driveway, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't sad. I was finished. Inside, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. There it was again, those glowing transactions, month after month. I went through them one by one. Mortgage, canceled. Car payments, canceled. Tuition, gone. Credit card transfers, deleted. Click after click, I severed every tie, every quiet, invisible line connecting me to a family who'd never saved me a seat. When I finished typing, I slowly closed the laptop and leaned back into my chair. A long, steady breath escaped my chest. Starting tomorrow, they would finally begin to understand just how much my love, my relentless, unquestioning, sacrificial love, had truly cost. And for the first time in what felt like forever, a quiet smile formed on my lips. 3 full days passed before the first call came in. I was out in my little backyard garden, hose in hand, gently watering the tomato plants I'd raised with far more appreciation and consistency than I'd ever received from my own family. The phone buzzed. David's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it stopped and returned my attention to the plants. They never took more than they needed. But the calls didn't stop. They kept coming. David, then Nova, then even Byron's school, probably wondering where the tuition money was. I ignored each one. Instead, I opened a bottle of wine, sat down at my kitchen table with a calculator and a notebook, and did something I should have done a long time ago. I added it all up. Every penny, every favor, every silent sacrifice. The sum of what it had cost me to be their safety net, their bank, their excuse not to grow up. The total was staggering. The pattern had started small, as it always does. Just a little help here and there. When David and Nova got married 15 years ago, they were just kids. Young, struggling. "Just help with the wedding," David had said. "Just a little for the house deposit. Just until we get on our feet." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe it was temporary. But 15 years later, they were still on my feet. I'd been covering their mortgage, $2,947 every month for the past 8 years, ever since David's construction business hit a rough patch that never quite went away. Then there was Nova's SUV, $651 per month, a luxury vehicle because she insisted she needed something safe when Byron was born. David's truck, $492 per month, because apparently he couldn't be a contractor without a truck more expensive than some people's homes. Byron's private school tuition was another $200 each month. Public school wasn't good enough for Nova's precious child. Utilities ran another $300 to $400, depending on how low she set the thermostat in the summer. Insurance, another $400 monthly, covering both cars in the house. Groceries were a whole other ordeal. Nova had developed this lovely habit of texting me photos of receipts, always followed by some dramatic explanation about why this week's bill was higher. Unexpected guests, growing kids, allergies. $800 to $1,000 a month just to feed her family. Then came the credit card payments, the ones that made my hands actually tremble. Nova's compulsive shopping had buried them in debt, and for years I'd been silently chipping away at it. $18,500 a month, just in minimum payments, and the balances never went down. How could they when she never stopped spending? Vacations. Oh, the vacations. Trips to Disney World, beach house rentals, weekend getaways, always posted online with some glowing caption about cherishing family memories and being grateful for the support that makes it all possible. That support, of course, was me. Those vacations averaged about $500 to $800 a month, spread out over the year. Medical bills weren't exempt. I paid whatever insurance didn't. Byron's braces, Nova's dermatology visits, David's physical therapy after he threw out his back moving furniture because hiring movers was too expensive. Then there were the clothes. Nova needed a professional wardrobe for her part-time boutique job. Byron outgrew shoes and sports gear like weeds after rain. David always needed something new for work. Home repairs, naturally, a new kitchen, a bathroom remodel, landscaping, pool maintenance. "It's an investment in the house, Mom," David would say, as though I'd ever see a single dollar back from that investment. By the time I got to the bottom of my calculations, I just stared at the total. My eyes blurred. In the last 5 years alone, I had given them $387,000, nearly $400,000, gone. My late husband's life insurance, my hard-earned savings, my retirement, all spent. For what? To sit alone at a table full of strangers at family gatherings while they laughed and clinked glasses and made memories together. Without me. I poured another glass of wine and kept going. The smaller things added up too. Birthday gifts that cost hundreds, because Nova always hinted at what Byron really wanted. Christmas presents that ballooned in price every year. Easter baskets that could rival a toy store. Halloween costumes more expensive than some families' entire grocery bills. And the emergencies. There were always emergencies. The time Nova's laptop broke and she had to have a new one right away for work. The water heater that died and couldn't wait for a cheaper repair. Byron's surgery for a broken arm when they were short on the deductible. Always something, always urgent, always solved by Grandma Harriet. Meanwhile, I thought about my friends at the senior center. Women like me who talked about skipping meals to afford their medication, choosing between heating and groceries. And here I was, funding a lifestyle that people half my age would kill for people who couldn't even make sure I had a chair at their dinner table. The worst part was how they'd made me believe it was all my idea. Nova was a master at twisting things into favors. For me. "I know how much you love spoiling Byron," she'd say, when sending me a link to some overpriced toy or camp. "We just want to make sure he knows how generous his grandmother is." Or when she wanted something for herself. "I saw this dress, perfect for Byron's school play, but it's just a little outside our budget. You probably think I'm silly, but I want Byron to be proud of his mom." And there I'd be, pulling out the credit card again. She made me feel like the doting grandmother, the generous matriarch, the one who could help, who wanted to. The truth was I was an ATM, one with emotion, sure, but an ATM all the same. David was no better. His manipulation came cloaked in guilt and obligation. He played the struggling provider role to perfection. "I hate asking, Mom," he'd say, "but Byron's really looking forward to this vacation. And Nova's been working so hard, as if I was supposed to be the answer to every financial mess they created. The heartbreaking truth? I had believed them. Every time, I'd felt needed, useful, like a good mother, a good grandmother, like I mattered. I even felt proud when Nova posted photos of their gorgeous home, their picture-perfect life. Look what love can build, I used to think. But all I had built was a prison, one made of my own misguided generosity. My phone buzzed again. Another call from David. This time I picked up. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he snapped. "The mortgage payment bounced and Nova's car got repossessed this morning." His voice wasn't concerned, not worried about me, not asking if I was okay, just angry that the money had stopped. "Hello, David," I said evenly. "How are you?" "How am I, Mom? We're in crisis mode over here." The bank had called about the mortgage company, Byron's school, Nova sobbing in a grocery store parking lot after they repossessed her car. The chaos was unraveling quickly, and the one question hanging in the air was, what happened to the transfers? I took a slow sip of wine, my eyes drifting to the garden, glowing in the soft amber light of early evening. I could almost pretend none of it concerned me. "I canceled them," I said. Silence. "You what?" David's voice sharpened. "You canceled them?" I went into my account and turned off the automatic payments. "It's really not that complicated." But you can't just do that," he stammered. "We rely on that money." And there it was, the truth he'd never dared to admit out loud until now. "We rely on that money." "I know you do," I said softly. "That's exactly the problem." "Mom, come on. If this is still about the seating thing at Byron's party, Nova told you it was a mistake. She feels terrible." A mistake. Even now, he was still shielding her, or maybe he truly believed it. Maybe he had to, or it would mean acknowledging how far things had gone. "This isn't about a party, David," I said, calm but firm. "This is about the way you and Nova have become so comfortable taking my money that you've stopped seeing me as a person. I'm not a trust fund. I'm your mother. That's not fair. We appreciate everything you've done." "Do you?" I cut him off. "Because from where I'm sitting, I only seem to matter when I'm signing checks. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Or invited me over for dinner? One you paid for? When did you last treat me like your mother instead of your emergency bailout fund?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "You're being dramatic. We love you, you know that? But you can't just cut us off. We have bills, we have responsibilities." "So do I replied. "And my first responsibility is to myself." Then I hung up, before he could say another word. It didn't take long for the messages to start flooding in. Nova had entered the fray now, and if David had tried to be diplomatic, she didn't bother. Her texts were barbed and furious. "Harriet, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is cruel and selfish. Byron is the one who's going to suffer because of your sudden tantrum. We never asked you to help. You offered. You can't just pull the rug out from under us like this. I'm calling your doctor. This isn't normal. You're not thinking straight." I read every message with a growing sense of stunned disbelief. Nova truly thought I was the one being unreasonable, that I was the one being unfair. After all these years of handouts, of being treated like a second-class member of my own family, she thought she was the victim. But it was her final message that made me laugh. Actually laugh out loud. What are we supposed to tell Byron when we have to pull him out of school? When we have to sell the house? What should they tell Byron? Maybe they could start with the truth, that they'd lived beyond their means for years, financed by a grandmother they'd used without a second thought. Or maybe they could explain that choices have consequences, that people can only be taken for granted for so long before something breaks. As I got ready for bed that night, something unexpected settled over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. For the first time in decades, I wasn't scrambling to solve someone else's crisis. I wasn't sacrificing my own needs to meet someone else's expectations. I wasn't responsible for anyone but myself. I knew tomorrow wouldn't be quiet. I expected more calls. Nova might even show up at my door. David would try guilt, then anger, then manipulation, the same tactics that had worked for years. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not the woman who left Byron's birthday party 3 days ago, humiliated and aching to belong. That woman would have done anything to feel like part of the family, even if it cost her everything. This woman, She had finally learned the difference between being loved and being used, and she would never go back. Exactly a week after I canceled the payments, Nova showed up at my house. I saw her from the living room window, sitting in a taxi parked in front of my driveway. It looked like she hadn't managed to get a new car yet. She sat there for a moment, drawing deep, shaky breaths before finally stepping out. She came dressed for war, the black dress that made her look somber and respectable, barely their makeup, as if to say, "I'm tired, I'm vulnerable." Hair pulled back in that careful way meant to scream, "I'm just a struggling mother doing my best." She knocked 3 times. I let her wait. When I finally opened the door, her face crumpled instantly into one of her signature emotional breakdowns. Tears summoned on command, like she'd rehearsed them in the cab. "Harriet, thank God you're home," she said breathlessly. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her in. Instead, I stepped out onto the front porch and shut the door behind me, crossed my arms, looked her in the eyes. "What can I do for you, Nova?" She blinked. That clearly wasn't the reception she'd expected. She'd probably pictured herself walking into my kitchen, sitting at my table, being offered tea while I listened sympathetically to her carefully spun story. "What can you do for me?" she repeated, indignant. "Harriet, you're tearing our family apart. Byron cried himself to sleep last night because we told him he might have to change schools. Is that really what you wanted, to hurt a child?" And there it was, the Byron card, her most trusted weapon. "I want you and David to take responsibility for your own lives," I said evenly. Her face flushed with anger. We've been working our asses off to trying to give Byron a good life. Do you think it's been easy for us asking for help? Do you think we enjoyed being dependent on you?" The lie was so bold it took my breath away. "You seem to enjoy it enough to keep doing it for 15 years. "We didn't have a choice," she snapped. I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had paused at her mailbox, clearly eavesdropping. Nova noticed too. She lowered her voice, but not the fury. "David's business never recovered from the recession. I've been working part-time so I could be there for Byron. We've been doing the best we can. And yet," I said quietly, "what you had always included my money. So much that you forgot it wasn't actually yours." Her face twisted. "You offered. Every time you offered. You said you wanted to help. You said you loved supporting your family. Don't act like we forced you." She wasn't wrong. I had offered. But what she refused to acknowledge was how I'd been prompted to offer through manipulation, guilt, carefully constructed stories of Byron's pain and their misfortune. The seas, the silence, the looks that said I was cold-hearted if I didn't reach for my wallet. "You're right," I said. For a moment, she looked relieved. "I did offer. And now I'm unoffering." She went pale. "You can't do this. We have obligations, contracts. The mortgage company doesn't care about your hurt feelings, Harriet. They want their money." "Then you'd better figure out how to get it," I said, "because I'm done pretending this is love when it's just a transaction." She screamed, her voice shrill, all pretense of composure falling away. "With what? With what, Harriet?" The pain and frustration poured from her like a dam breaking. "David barely makes enough to cover groceries, and my job pays peanuts. You know our situation. You've always known it." And there it was, the heart of everything. Yes, I had always known. I'd known that they built a life far beyond their means, a life they expected me to bankroll without end. They had never once tried to live within their budget because they never had to. Why would they? I had always stepped in. "Maybe you should get a better job," I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. "Maybe David should grow his business or pick up something on the side. Maybe it's time you moved into a house you can actually afford." Nova looked at me like I'd told her to take Byron and go live on another planet. "We can't just uproot him. His whole world is here, his school, his friends, his soccer team. David can't just magically conjure up more money." "But I can?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "That's it, isn't it, Nova? David can't make more money, but Grandma Harriet can just keep writing checks forever?" "That's different," she snapped, her voice defensive. "You're retired. You don't have the same stresses. Your house is paid off. You don't have a child to support." "I have a grandson," I said quietly but firmly. "And what I think about is the kind of man he'll grow up to be if he watches his parents exploit an elderly woman and call it love." The words hit her like a slap. Her lips parted, her eyes wide. For a moment, nothing came out. Then the tears returned, only this time they looked real. "How can you say that?" she whispered. We love you, Harriet. Byron adores you. You're his grandmother. And yet, I said, my voice tightening, you didn't save me a seat at his birthday party. She winced. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. That was a mistake. I told you we miscounted. Stop, I cut her off. My voice was sharper than I meant, but I didn't walk it back. Stop lying to me, Nova. Stop lying to yourself. You didn't miscount. You made a choice. You left me out because you're so used to seeing me as a source of money that you forgot I'm a person. We stared at each other across the growing, gaping space between us. She was calculating now, thinking, weighing. The tears hadn't softened me. Her flash of anger earlier had backfired. Guilt wasn't landing either. So what was left? Fine, she said at last, her voice turning cold. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. You cut us off, and you'll lose Byron. You'll lose David. You'll lose your entire family. Is that what you want, Harriet? Is your pride worth more than that? Her threat hung in the air like smoke from a gun just fired. She was gambling everything on one assumption, that my love for Byron would override every boundary, every bit of self-respect I had left, that I'd cave at the first sign of losing him. 6 months ago, she might have been right. If loving Byron means paying for your lifestyle, I said slowly, quietly, then maybe I'll have to love him from afar until he's old enough to understand the difference. Nova's mouth fell open. She had thrown down her ace. I didn't blink. You're going to regret this, she hissed, backing away toward the waiting taxi. You're going to regret this so much when you're sitting alone in this house. No family, no grandson, no one who gives a damn about you. Just remember, you chose this. I watched her climb into the cab and disappear down the street. My heart pounded like it was trying to break out of my chest. The threat she'd made wasn't empty. She would try to cut Byron off from me. And David would go along with it because that's what he always did, whatever Nova wanted. But as I stood there on my porch, something surprising that happened. I didn't feel the panic I expected. I didn't collapse into grief or doubt or terror. I felt something else entirely, relief. Because finally, Nova had shown me who she really was. And in doing so, she had shown me who David had chosen to be by staying with her. They weren't my family. They were people who had been using me. And the second I stopped being useful, they showed their true colors. Real family doesn't threaten you when you say no. Real family doesn't punish you for refusing to sacrifice your well-being for their convenience. That evening, David called. His voice was low and tired, worn around the edges in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, he began, please. Nova told me what happened. She's really upset. I'm sure she is. Look, I know it got tense, but can we please find a way to work through this? For Byron's sake, if nothing else. What exactly are you hoping we work out, David? I want my family back together. I want you and Byron's life. I want us to move forward. Hope stirred faintly in my chest, cautious and small. Maybe David was different. Maybe he saw through this. What does that look like to you? I asked. Well, obviously we can't go back to how things were, he said, hesitating. But maybe we could come up with a compromise. Maybe you just help with the essential stuff, the mortgage, Byron's school fees. We'll cut back on the extras. The flicker of hope died instantly. Even now, after everything, he was still asking for money. Less money, sure, but money all the same. David, I said softly, do you understand what happened at Byron's party? It was a misunderstanding. No, it wasn't. Nova deliberately humiliated me in front of a room full of people. And you stood there and let her. After 15 years of paying for your life, I wasn't even worth a chair at your son's birthday party. A long silence. Then his voice broke. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have said something. I should have defended you. Yes, I said simply. You should have, but you didn't. And that tells me everything I need to know about where I rank in your life. But we can fix this, he pleaded. We can make it right, with your help. With my money, you mean? No, that's not, he stopped, catching himself. It's not just about the money. Isn't it, I asked? Because every solution you've mentioned so far includes me continuing to fund your life. In the background, I heard Nova's voice, sharp, agitated, but couldn't make out the words. I have to go, David said quickly. But Mom, please, just think about it. Think about Byron. Then the line went dead. I sat there, alone in my kitchen, staring at my phone, and realized something that should have shattered me, but it didn't. I might never see my grandson again, but I realized something else too. I would rather lose a family that saw me as nothing more than a bank account than keep paying to be disrespected, ignored, and manipulated. For the first time in 15 years, I was free. And that freedom, it was worth more than every cent I'd ever given them. The silence came immediately after. But it wasn't the calm, healing kind I'd been craving. It was the cold, punishing kind. The kind designed to erase someone from existence. My phone, which had once buzzed daily with needs and updates disguised as love, went still. No text from David, no photos of Byron, nothing. 2 weeks had passed since Nova's last visit. There had been no phone calls, not even the usual ones disguised as requests for advice that always ended up being about money. Nothing. Complete silence. I told myself this was what I had asked for. I'd purchased my freedom, finally drawn a line, and silence was the cost. I reminded myself of that again and again, but as days slipped into weeks, the quiet began to lose its peacefulness and started feeling more like punishment, like exile. It was a regular Tuesday, and I was picking up a few things at the grocery store when I bumped into Janet Morrison in the cereal aisle. Janet had been Byron's babysitter years ago. She'd known our family for a long time, probably earned more money from me over the years than from her actual job, considering how much extra I paid her to make sure my grandson was taken care of properly. "Mrs. Holloway," she called out brightly, as if we'd just spoken yesterday. "I haven't seen you in forever. How's little Byron doing?" Her question hit me like a punch in the chest. How was Byron doing? I didn't know, I hadn't seen him, I hadn't heard his voice, I hadn't even gotten a text with a recent photo. He's doing well, I managed, trying to keep my face composed. Janet's expression brightened. "I heard about the school situation. That must be really hard on all of you, but at least you'll get to spend more time with him now, right? Silver linings and all that." My stomach dropped. "School situation?" "Oh, you know," she said, tilting her head like it was obvious. "Switching to public school. Nova mentioned it when she called to see if I could help out with after-school care. She said it was just temporary, while you guys figured things out financially." My confusion must have shown because Janet's expression changed in an instant. Oh no, you didn't know." I don't remember how I got out of that conversation. I said something, anything, and hurried to the parking lot, my hands trembling as I started the car. So it was true. They had actually done it. They had pulled Byron out of his school, the school I had paid for, the one he loved. And no one had told me. I found out from a former babysitter, of all people, in the middle of a grocery store. That night, for the first time in 3 weeks, I drove by their house. I hadn't planned to. I just ended up there, turning down their street without thinking. I parked across the road and sat in silence, staring at what used to be their home. The for sale sign on the front lawn was painful enough, but it was the smaller things that broke me. Nova's flower boxes, which were always filled with vibrant, expensive blooms, now sat neglected, dry, brittle, and brown. The lawn, once perfectly trimmed thanks to the landscaping service I paid for, was now overgrown and patchy. David's truck wasn't in the driveway. Repossessed, probably. Like Nova's car. But what truly shattered me was Byron. I saw him through the living room window, sitting alone on the floor in front of the television. The room looked wrong, bare, missing furniture, hollow. They must have sold pieces to make ends meet. He looked so small, so quiet, so alone, and I just sat there across the street, watching my grandson through a pane of glass, and all I could feel was shame. Crushing, overwhelming shame. I had done this. I had let this happen. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. I barely used Facebook anymore, but for some reason I opened it. Nova had posted a photo of Byron at what looked like a school carnival. He was smiling, but it was a fake smile, the kind of smile kids learn to wear when adults tell them to pose. The caption made my heart ache. Byron being brave at his new school's fall festival. Some changes are hard, but we're grateful for the fresh start in the people who truly care about our family. Blessed, new beginnings, real family. The comments were filled with support and questions. "And what happened? Why did you switch schools?" someone asked. Nova replied quickly and with purpose. "Yeah, sometimes you find out who your real family is. We're learning to depend on ourselves and the people who actually love us unconditionally." The message couldn't have been more clear. I was the conditional one. I was the one who had walked away. In her story, I was the villain, the one who abandoned a struggling family when they needed help the most. I kept scrolling, more photos, more posts, all painting the same picture. A family fighting to survive without the safety net I used to provide. There was Byron, helping to pack boxes, the caption reading something about teaching him the value of hard work. There was Nova in a diner uniform, smiling bravely at the camera. New job, new adventures, the caption read. Sometimes life takes you places you never imagined, but we're thankful for every blessing. She had gotten a full-time job. Nova, after years of bouncing between part-time gigs and counting on my financial cushion, she had finally stepped up. And David, he appeared in a few posts too. He looked thinner, more tired, but he was working, really working, painting houses, building decks, manual labor, not the scattered contracting work he used to do when he knew I'd cover the gaps. A part of me wanted to feel proud. They were finally taking charge of their lives. But a bigger part of me felt sick. They had rewritten the narrative to turn their hardship into a story of resilience and martyrdom. And I was cast as the cruel grandmother who cut them off and walked away. The worst part? Seeing Byron. He didn't show up in many of the posts. Nova was smart enough not to exploit her child's pain for likes. But when he did appear, he looked smaller, diminished, like the world had closed in on him a little more. In one photo, he sat in a cramped, shabby-looking living room, reading a library book instead of playing with the expensive toys that used to clutter their home. I wanted to reach through the screen. I wanted to call him, hear his voice, tell him Grandma missed him, loved him. But Nova had made the terms of engagement clear. Contact would happen only when she allowed it, and she hadn't allowed it at all. 3 weeks after that night in the grocery store, I was watering my garden when I heard Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, call over the fence. "Harriet, dear, are you all right? I've been worried about you." I looked up, startled. We'd lived next to each other for 5 years, but we weren't close. She was always kind, but we never shared much beyond pleasantries. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, trying to sound normal. "It's just, I haven't seen your family around lately. That sweet little boy who used to help you with the flowers. Is everything okay?" Her concern, the warmth in her voice, nearly undid me. "We're taking a break from each other," I said quietly. She nodded, understanding more than I expected. "Family can be complicated. My daughter and I had a rough time a few years back. Sometimes space is good, even when it hurts." "How long were you apart?" I asked. 6 months, she said with a small sigh. "Longest 6 months of my life, but we needed it. Sometimes you have to lose people to realize what you actually mean to each other." That night, I lay in bed replaying her words. 6 months. Could I survive 6 months of this? What if it stretched longer? What if Byron forgot me completely? But then I remembered that birthday party, sitting by myself while Nova played hostess at the center of attention. 15 years of being quietly depended on, of being appreciated only for what I could give. 15 years of invisible sacrifice. Maybe some losses, even the painful ones, are worth enduring. The next morning, just as I was finishing my coffee, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed. Her expression was kind but serious. "Mrs. Holloway," she said when I opened the door. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a social worker." The knock on the door had come just after lunch, and nothing could have prepared me for who was standing there. A woman with a calm demeanor, neatly dressed and holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as someone from Child Protective Services, and in that moment, I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. My blood ran cold. I fumbled with the doorknob, my hands trembling as I opened the door. My voice shook. "Is Byron okay?" "He's fine," she said quickly, her tone reassuring. "May I come in? I'd like to ask you a few questions." We sat down in the living room and she introduced herself as Sarah. She pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open with deliberate care. "We received a report regarding the welfare of a child. The caller claimed that a family member may be withholding financial support necessary for the child's well-being." I stared at her, stunned. Someone had actually called CPS on me? Because I stopped financially supporting my own son? Sarah kept her expression steady, professional. "Can you tell me about your relationship with your grandson and his parents?" I took a breath, steadying myself, and then I told her everything. I didn't hold back. The years I spent helping them financially, the way Nova humiliated me at Byron's birthday party, The veiled threats, the emotional manipulation. Sarah listened quietly, occasionally jotting down notes, never once interrupting or judging. When I was done, she closed her notebook slowly. Mrs. Holloway, you are not legally obligated to support your adult son's household. The person who made this call seems to have misunderstood how financial responsibility within families actually works. But Byron, my voice faltered. He's suffering because of what I've done. Sarah met my eyes and asked gently, is he being fed? Does he have clothing? A place to live? Yes, but it's not like before. It's not the same. Then he's not suffering. He's adjusting. That's different. Her words hung in the air long after she left. Byron was adjusting. Children are resilient, she had said, sometimes more so than the adults who agonize over them. I sat alone in the quiet and tried to let her words sink in. Maybe this was exactly the lesson Byron needed. That money isn't what defines a person's worth. That family doesn't exist solely to be a financial safety net. That love, real, deep, unconditional love, can't be bought or bartered. That evening, I made a decision that felt more permanent than any I'd made in years. I wrote Byron a letter, not to be mailed now, but to be kept safe until he was old enough to truly understand. In it, I poured out everything, the reasons behind my decisions, how deeply I loved him, and how I hoped that one day he'd come to see the truth for himself. I sealed it in an envelope with his name on it and placed it in my jewelry box, right next to my late husband's wedding ring. One day, when Byron was ready to form his own opinions, when he could choose for himself what kind of relationship he wanted with me, he'd read that letter and know the whole story. Until then, all I could do was wait and try to learn something I had never been very good at: how to love someone without needing to rescue them. The silence that followed wasn't as painful as it had been before. It felt different now, less like rejection, more like preparation. I was learning to see myself in a new light, without being defined by how much I could do for others. It was harder than I'd expected, but in a way I hadn't anticipated, it was also liberating. And then came the call that changed everything. It was Marie, Nova's former best friend. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years, not since she and Nova had some falling out that I'd never quite understood. So when the phone rang that Tuesday afternoon, 4 months after my family had cut me off, I nearly let it go to voicemail. Harriet, it's Marie. I hope you don't mind me calling, but there's something you should know. Her voice sounded nervous, unsure. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, somewhere off the radar, neutral territory, a place where we wouldn't run into familiar faces. Marie looked older than I remembered, more tired, not just in her face, but in her spirit. She ordered her coffee black and got straight to the point. I heard about everything that happened with Nova, the money, the falling out. I stiffened, bracing myself for another guilt trip. I expected her to say something about how I'd hurt Byron or turned my back on family. What about it? She's been telling people that you had a breakdown, that you got paranoid and started imagining things. She wrapped her hands around her cup like it was the only warmth in the room. But I know that's not true because I know what she really thought about you. My heart began to race. What do you mean? Remember our girls' nights? She asked. Those monthly dinners when the husbands took the kids? I nodded. They had stopped not long before Nova and Marie's friendship imploded. Nova used to talk about you a lot back then, she said, her voice faltering, but not in the way a daughter-in-law should. A wave of heat swept through the coffee shop. The air suddenly felt thick, like I couldn't breathe. What did she say? She called you her personal ed. Marie's voice was barely above a whisper. She'd brag about how easy it was to get money from you. She'd come up with these elaborate stories about Byron needing something or David's business being in trouble. She'd practice what she was going to say with us first. Each word hit me like a punch to the gut. She said the trick was making you feel like you were being generous, not manipulated. She knew exactly which buttons to press. Your guilt over not being there for David when he was a child. Your fear of missing out on Byron's life. Your need to feel needed. I sat there reeling. Every carefully crafted conversation over the years flashed through my mind. The way Nova would mention some expense. How she'd sigh and say, "But we understand if it's too much," already knowing I'd rush to offer help. There's more, Marie added quietly. She used to complain about having to include you in family events. Said David insisted on it, but she wished you'd just send a check and stay home. The birthday party. It all fell into place. Nova hadn't forgotten to invite me by accident. She'd been slowly edging me out for years. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Tears welled in Marie's eyes. Because I was jealous. I thought she was lucky to have you. My mother-in-law was nothing like you. I convinced myself she didn't mean it, that she was just venting. What changed? She came to me after you cut them off, Marie said, her voice tight with emotion. Told me you'd had a breakdown, said you abandoned them, then asked me for $5,000 for Byron's school fees. I stared at her in disbelief. When I said I couldn't help, she actually suggested I take out a credit card cash advance. That's when I realized she'd use anyone. I sat there struggling to process everything. My stomach churned. I felt devastated, but also vindicated. The woman I had treated like a daughter had been mocking me behind my back for years. And my instincts about the birthday party, they had been right. It hadn't been a miscommunication. It was calculated cruelty. There's something else, Marie said gently, about David. And I braced myself, heart pounding, for whatever truth was about to come next. Just got tired of being sad? I asked him gently. Byron didn't answer right away. He stared down at the drawing in front of him, his small fingers tracing the sun he'd drawn years ago. Then he looked up at me, his brown eyes full of a kind of knowing that children shouldn't have to carry. Because I get tired of being sad too, and sometimes when I'm tired of it, I just stop thinking about the stuff that makes me feel that way, just for a while. His voice was soft, but every word landed with weight. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You're a very brave boy, Byron, and you're not wrong. I was tired of hurting, tired of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. He nodded slightly, like he understood that on a level far deeper than his age should have allowed. I never stopped loving you, I said after a pause. Not for 1 second, but sometimes loving someone means making hard choices. And sometimes it means stepping back when being close only causes more pain. Byron absorbed that in silence. Then with a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, Do you think we can start over? That question cracked something open in me. My throat tightened, and I blinked away tears I hadn't expected to come. I'd like that, I said, my voice catching. I'd like that very much. He gave me a tiny, hopeful smile. Maybe next time I come over, I could bring one of my new drawings. I still like art. I would love that, I replied. In fact, I'll make space on the fridge again, just for you. He beamed at that, and the weight that had pressed on my chest for so long felt just a little bit lighter. For the first time in a long while, something that had broken felt like it might, with care, begin to mend. We sat together, eating cookies and looking through old photos, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between us. Outside, David's truck remained parked at the curb, unmoving. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was that Byron was here, that he had come on his own, that some part of him still believed in us. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for a new beginning. Even when you were smiling, you looked sad. I always noticed it, Grandma. Every time you came to visit, or cheered for me at my soccer games, or gave me birthday gifts, I saw it. Your face looked happy, but your eyes looked like they were holding something back, something heavy. I had to swallow a lump in my throat before I could speak. You're a very observant boy, I finally managed to say. Byron glanced down at the cookie in his hand, took a small bite, then added thoughtfully, Mom and Dad used to fight about you. After you left, Dad said Mom was mean to you. But Mom said you were mean first. I don't think you're mean, Grandma. What do you think? He was trying to make a sense of it all, and I could see how seriously he was taking it. He wasn't just asking to ask. He wanted clarity, a truth that made sense. I think grown-ups make things too complicated, he continued before I could answer. I missed you, but Mom said you didn't want to see me anymore because you were mad at her and Dad. His words cut deep. That's not true, Byron, I said gently. I wanted to see you every single day. Then why didn't you call me? There it was, the question I had been dreading. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that he had become a pawn in a game of pride and resentment between adults? That sometimes loving someone means walking away instead of staying and fighting. I thought calling might make things harder for you, but I said, struggling to choose words he could understand. Sometimes adults have to make decisions that don't feel good, but that might be better in the long run. Byron nodded, his eyes serious. Like when you made Dad get a real job. The comment caught me off guard. What do you mean? I asked. Dad works really hard now. He wakes up super early, comes home all tired, but he's different. Not worried all the time like before. And Mom, too. She complains about work sometimes, but I think she's proud now more than she used to be. I looked at Byron and saw a maturity in his face that hadn't been there a year ago. Are you proud of them? I asked. Yeah, he said without hesitation. It was scary at first, when we moved and I had to go to a new school and everything. But now, I don't know, it feels more real, like we're actually doing things ourselves instead of... He paused, then shrugged. Instead of what? Instead of pretending. The word landed heavily between us, echoing the truth I had only come to understand in recent years. Byron had seen it. What I had once believed was a life I was helping to support turned out to be an illusion. An elegant performance built on money that wasn't theirs. Byron, I said carefully, do you understand why I stopped helping with money? He nodded. Because they were being mean to you, and because they needed to learn to take care of themselves. Are you angry with me? He gave it some real thought. I was. At first, I missed my old room, and my old school, and having money for stuff I wanted. But then I figured out I still had everything that really matters. Like what? I asked. Like Mom and Dad and my friends. I made new ones, and I get books from the library now instead of buying them, and... He paused, his smile a little shy. And now I'm here with you. My hand reached across the table and gently wrapped around his small one. I missed you so much, I said. I missed you too. That's why I asked Dad if I could come see you. You asked him? I was surprised. Last week, I told him I understood why you were mad, but I wanted to see if you still loved me. The honesty in his voice broke something open in me. I felt tears sting my eyes. What did he say? He said he'd been wanting to bring me for a while, but he was scared you'd be mad at him. Byron squeezed my hand. Are you mad at him? I looked out the window. David was sitting in his truck, waiting quietly for his son to finish visiting the grandmother he'd once helped push away. I'm sad about some things that happened, I said slowly, but I love your dad, and I love you. What about Mom? The harder question, one I had thought about many times. I hope your mom is learning to be happy with the life she and your dad are building, I said simply. Byron didn't push for more. He seemed to accept that answer. We spent the next hour flipping through photo albums and talking about his new life, his school, his new friends, his teachers. He told me how he helped his dad with little projects on weekends, how his mom taught him to make simple meals, how proud he felt when his teacher praised his math skills. The boy who used to have everything handed to him was learning the quiet joy of earning something himself. When it was time to leave, Byron threw his arms around me. Can I come visit you again? Anytime you want, I said, but make sure to ask your parents first. I will. He paused, then looked at me with serious eyes. Grandma, I think what you did was really brave. What do you mean? You stopped pretending too. That's brave. I watched David's truck pull away, Byron waving at me through the window. And for the first time in years, I felt a deep, unwavering sense of peace. Not the fragile peace that only lasts when everything goes according to plan, but a richer peace, the kind that settles in your bones when you stop living a lie. Yes, I had lost a son and a daughter-in-law who only valued what I could provide, but I had found myself again. And miraculously, I hadn't lost my grandson. Byron had found his way back to me on his own, in his own way, and with a clear understanding of what had happened. 6 months after that first visit, he started coming over every other Saturday. David would drop him off and pick him up, and little by little, those brief exchanges began to soften. We never spoke directly about the past, but I started seeing something shift in David's eyes, a quiet respect for the choice I had made. Nova never came with them, and I had made my peace with that. Some relationships can't be healed, and trying to force it only does more harm. Instead, Byron and I rebuilt our bond, slowly, steadily, on a new foundation of truth and trust rather than duty. I taught him how to grow tomatoes, how to cook from scratch, how to save and budget his allowance. And in return, he taught me something even more valuable. That real love doesn't need to be bought. That sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to become strong on their own. On my 70th birthday, Byron handed me a handmade card. Inside, in his careful handwriting, were the words, "One, thank you for teaching me that real love doesn't cost anything." I keep that card in the drawer beside a letter I once wrote him during our estrangement. A letter I never had to give him because he figured it out on his own. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine in hand. The world around me moved gently. Mrs. Patterson called over the fence to ask how my birthday had been. Down the street, a young family was having a barbecue, the sound of their laughter floating through the warm evening air. I was alone, but not lonely. I was free, but not cut off. I had learned at last the difference between being loved and being used. And I had chosen love, even when it meant walking away from people who couldn't tell the difference. The woman who used to sit quietly at family gatherings, afraid to ask for respect, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who understood that you can't buy your way into a family that truly loves you, because real love would never make you try. And now, as I share this story with you, I wonder, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Have you ever lived something like this? Tell me below. And while you're here, I'm leaving 2 more of my favorite stories on the final screen. I think they just might surprise you. Thank you for being here with me until the end.